ni hao, ni hao. Welcome to the Silk Road Movie Podcast, a new weekly podcast bringing the very best in Chinese film to British and international audiences. My name is James, and I'll be taking you on this journey along the cinematic Silk Road, travelling between China and the West through films ranging from the classics of the past through to new, modern stories and the films of the future. The podcast goes out weekly on Thursdays, and you can subscribe to us on all the usual major podcast platforms like iTunes, Spotify, Google, and others. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and social media under Silk Road Movie. We're also going out over in China, and I really hope that we're bringing film fans from the East and the West together. Thanks for joining me for this episode, in which I'm going to be talking about one of the biggest Chinese films of the last year. One of the most popular, one of the most award-winning, and I think it's fair to say, one of the very best. Now, I'm sure some of you saw the teaser picture we posted on social media, and you've probably got a pretty good idea of what film it is. But just to give you another quick hint, the film stars two of the hottest, most up-and-coming young talents in China. In case you're still not quite sure, here's a quick clip from the trailer.
这世界上就两种人，没本事被欺负的人和有本事的坏人。
那你是哪种人？
Any guesses? Okay, the film is Better Days, which was directed by Derek Tsang, and it's his follow-up film to the box office hit Soulmate. Derek Tsang's a very interesting young director, and we're going to be talking a bit more about him through the episode. So the film stars a couple of China's, definitely you could say the sort of most exciting up-and-coming talents, very, very hot in the press, huge fan base. We have Zhou Dongyu and Jackson Yi, and we're going to be talking a bit about them and their roles in the film as well. I'm also very excited to say that we've got an exclusive interview with one of the film's writers, Lam Wing Sum, and we're going to talk to her a bit later about the process of writing the film, the creative side. Because it's actually adapted from a very popular novel, and we'll talk a bit about that with her as well. So yeah, do stay tuned for that. As a special treat in this episode, we've also got a bit of acting for you from a couple of very talented actors, Eleanor Blackburn and Hyland. And they're going to be playing out a couple of key scenes from Better Days later on, and just to give you a flavour of the drama of the film. So yeah, please stay tuned for that as well. Okay, so let's talk about Better Days. Better Days has been one of the most talked about Chinese films of last year, and it's a film which is still kind of in the process of getting a wider international release, still playing some festivals, and it's been going down really well with audiences in China, but also around the world. It's also it's quite a different film to what some people might expect to have come from China in terms of the subject matter and how it approaches it. And it has run into a fair amount of controversy on its way to the screen. As I mentioned, the film was directed by Derek Tsang, and it's actually based on a popular novel called In His Youth, In Her Beauty, by Zhou Yueshi, who's a 29-year-old female writer, also known as Zhou. She's written some really popular works, including the My Dear series, and a bunch of travel adventure novels as well. Interestingly, her name Zhou has the same phonetic pronunciation as the word for alcoholic wine, which I personally quite like, and it has the character of black stone, like jade. The film was adapted from the novel by a team of screenwriters, actually, and this included Nan Chen, Yuan Li, Yiming Xu, and Lam Wing Sum, who, as I've said, we're going to be hearing from later. Better Days was Lam's second film working with Derek Tsang after they worked together on the hit Soulmate. And she's also a novelist, having written books like Virtual Recall, which is a sci-fi psychological thriller comedy mix. And that was made into a film itself back in 2010. But yeah, stay tuned for the interview. It's a very interesting chat with her. And yeah, I'll be asking her about the process of adapting the novel and about the creative process between her and Derek Tsang. Chinese audiences were getting pretty excited about the film at the time of its original planned release, which had been supposed to be early 2019. And I think part of this was because of the cast. As you said, the film stars Jackson Yee, and he's from a top boy band called TF Boys. And recently, he's been making a lot of moves to kind of shed the pop star image. And he's becoming a lot more recognized as a serious actor, appearing in a number of films over the last few years, including Mr. Six, which is it's a fantastic Beijing set drama about an aging gangster who's actually played by the famous director Feng Xiaogang. And I think it's a film which really more people need to see, so yeah, check it out. More recently, Jackson starred with Lei Jianyin in a famous 2019 TV show called The Longest Day in Chang'an, which got him a lot of good reviews, and which has had another boost now since the success of Better Days and his performance. It's fair to say that he's incredibly popular, and recently the crowds were going absolutely wild for him on the red carpet at First International Film Festival in China. The film also stars Zhou Dongyu, and she's kind of rated as one of the most talented young actresses in China. And she shot to fame after being chosen kind of from nowhere to star in Zhang Yimou's film Under the Hawthorn Tree back in 2010. And since then, she's been in lots of acclaimed and popular films like My Old Classmate, Breakup Buddies, and Animal World, which was released in UK cinemas and is on Netflix. And more recently, she was in My People, My Country in one of the segments. Zhou also worked with Derek Tsang on Soulmate in 2016, which is it's a coming-of-age romantic drama which she headlined along with the actress Sandra Ma, and it was produced by the legendary Peter Chan. I gotta say, Soulmate is also a fantastic film, and it goes way beyond what you might expect from the kind of love story premise it has, and it's definitely a film which we'll come back to in a future episode. It was released internationally, including being released in the US by Cheng Cheng Films. And let's take a quick listen to the trailer here just to get a feel of what the film's like.
我遇见你，所以我喜欢你。
我喜欢你，
所以我陪伴你。我陪伴你，所以我嫉妒你。
我嫉妒你，
所以我在乎你。
我在乎你，
所以我心疼你。
我心疼你，所以我离开你。
我离开你，
所以我
想念你。
所以我恨你。
我恨你，
所以我爱你。
我叫安生。
我叫七月。
So there was even more excitement and anticipation for Better Days after it was selected to screen at the 2019 Berlin Film Festival, which is obviously, a very big international stage. Unfortunately, like Zhang Yimou's 1 Second the same year, the film was pulled from the festival lineup, though it did screen later in the year at the Macau Film Festival, and it had a bit of a surprise Chinese cinema release in November 2019. Despite coming from out of nowhere, kind of, the film was a really big hit at the box office in China, and it stayed at the top of the box office for several weeks. It received very strong reviews, and in particular, really strong reactions from younger audiences, who I think probably identified a lot with its characters and the story, which revolves around bullying and university entrance exam pressure. The film had kind of a limited international rollout, and it did play here in the UK, and also in the US, Canada, and Australia. And worldwide, it pulled in more than $220 million US. It's been getting more attention again after not too long ago. It swept the prizes at the Hong Kong Film Awards and the Hong Kong Critics Society Awards, where it got like Best Film, Best Director, Acting, Editing, Screenplay, and yeah, pretty much every award. It's still turning up at some festivals internationally, and hopefully it'll be coming to online soon in the UK and the West. And given that it didn't receive too much of a profile when it was released, I think now is a great time to revisit it, especially since I think it's one of the strongest Chinese films of the last year. To talk about the plot, the story opens with Zhou Dongyu as Chen Nian, who's one of the top students in her class and who's trying not to be distracted from studying for the all-important Gaokao entrance exam. This is a bit hard because her mother is involved in some black market dealings and is trying to keep a roof over their heads while staying one step ahead of her creditors, which, obviously has an impact on Chen Nian herself. Her life is thrown into disarray one day when she places a jacket over the face of a classmate who threw herself to her death from the school building. And even though this is an act of kindness, it puts her in the crosshairs of a particularly vicious group of school bullies. She starts to find herself being targeted in the classroom and on her way home as well, and the bullies are making her life hell, beating her up, ripping up her school books, and just trying to make her as miserable as possible. After being attacked on the way home one night, she sees a young man being beaten by a group of thugs, and she tries to call the police since nobody else is doing anything at all to help. The thugs then turn on her, and she's thrown to the ground along with the guy being attacked, who turns out to be Zhou, Jackson Yi, who's a punk who basically makes a living through petty crime on the streets. Although they don't get on at first, you've got the whole good girl, bad guy dynamic. The two do become close. With the bullies stepping up their campaign against Nian, Bei takes on the role of her protector, guarding her on the streets, and trying to help her to focus on her studies, until events take a tragic turn. I don't really want to say anything more than this, as the film, it has quite a few twists and turns as it goes on, and it does go into some quite unexpected territory.
高考完，我决定是大人了，但是从来没有一节课教会我们如何变成大人。
我将带着从容的微笑。
And so now let's have the first of our two acting scenes. And so a big thanks again to Eleanor May Blackburn and Hyland Fuller. So the scene now is, this is about 28 minutes into the film. And after another day of being bullied at school, this time kind of with her classmates making fun of her mother and their financial problems, Chen Yan meets Xiao Bei outside the school in the evening. This is the second time they've met after she tried to rescue him from being beaten up by a gang of thugs the night before. She's very upset, and he takes her for a ride on his motorbike through the city streets before arriving back at his home, which is a small, run-down place on the wrong side of the tracks. He enters first. He lives by himself, and his place is messy.
Sit. Shut the door. You fighting with your boyfriend? Why come here if you have one? Do you like me?
What's there to like? Never even considered it.
Why follow me home then?
I didn't expect you to bring me here.
Is my place too shabby for you? Don't worry. I'm not going to sleep with you.
Why bring it up then?
I did consider it though.
Are you going to keep talking about it?
I'm just making small talk.
Has no one ever taught you manners?
You scared now? I'm just a punk. Won't bother with manners.
Okay, there we go. Very cool. And I think, I think from the scene you can get what I was saying about the plot, about the sort of changing dynamic between the two. Obviously, with Xiao Bei being kind of the sort of bad young street punk, and her being a top student. And I think even from this scene, you can feel there's kind of some tension between them. And, it's fairly inevitable that, that's going to change during the film. But I think it's a very cool script in this regard. And it has a nice balance between the sort of ways things shift between them and the romantic elements. So let's move on and talk a bit about Derek Tsang, who I think is a really interesting director. And he's actually the son of Hong Kong star Eric Tsang, who, he was in pretty much every Hong Kong film of the 80s and 90s. Derek Tsang is actually an actor himself, and he's been in like a really long list of films, mostly in Hong Kong. And he starred in a lot of films by, Pang Ho Chung, who's a fantastic director. He was in films like the Love in a Cuff films, Dream Home, AV in Aberdeen. And he's also been in quite a few action and genre films like Z-Storm, S-Storm, and the and the awesome Zombie Fight Club. So yeah, really solid credentials as an actor. His career as a director has been pretty different though. And after his Hong Kong film directing debut, Lover's Discourse, which is a very cool film by the way, he's worked kind of between Hong Kong and the mainland. And the films he's done are Lacuna, Soulmate, as we've mentioned, and now Better Days. This definitely gives him a different perspective, and you can see that in his approach. And I think, maybe because he's still a pretty young filmmaker. He was born in 1979. I think he's one of the very few directors who's really managed to nail and combine the Hong Kong and mainland approaches and the style and, appealing to both audiences. As I've said, both Soulmate and Better Days they're very much youth films, which is maybe something else which fits him as a young director. And so one of the things I was interested to know about was, what attracted him to the story and what the process of writing the film was like. To find out more about this, let's hear from the writer Lam Wing Sum. Better Days is adapted from Zhou Yuexi's novel, In His Youth, In Her Beauty. What attracted you and Derek Tsang to the novel, and why did you decide to make it into a film? Were there many changes made or differences between the novel and the film?
The original story was more like a typical teenage romance story. But from the outset, the director has said that he didn't want to portray a love story. So our first challenge is that we keep the charisma of the two main characters and the background of the school bullying, but we have to build on it. What he wanted to portray is how these two teenagers faced up to the cruelties of the world. They're not really like lovers, but more like brother and sister. The hardship was that we have to look at a lot of videos on school bullying in order to capture the essence of the social issues. So that was not a pleasant thing to do at all. In the end, I think over 50% of the plots were recreated. But I enjoyed the process very much because apart from being a screenwriter, I'm also a novelist. So it was a very interesting challenge.
That's very interesting. You also worked on Soulmate with Derek Tsang. What's the creative process for you two working together?
For Soulmate, the last movie, I came on board first because the movie company wanted a finished script before finding a suitable director. So it is after I have finished writing the full script, and then I met Derek Tsang, the director, for the first time. And then we sit down together and fine-tune the story together with my teammates. Whereas for Better Days is different because we have decided to work on a second movie project together. So from day one, he picked the novel himself, and then we developed the story together. He actually sit in every screenplay meeting with my teammates.
So kind of linked to that, I would say Soulmate and Better Days they're both youth films, that they deal with very different subjects. But do you think they have other things in common? And why were they so popular with audiences and critics?
Although the two movies are quite different in style, very different in style, I think they share similar emotional sentiments. There is a sense of loss, the loss of innocence when we were growing up, and a yearning for an intimate bonding with another human being. To me, both movies are very sad, but I admire the characters, the courage of the characters who never gave up hoping for a better world, hoping to become a better self, a better person. I think and I hope it is this inner light that shines through the characters that touched the critics and the audiences.
That's very interesting to hear. I must admit that I've not read the novel myself, though from what I know, it does sound a lot more like a romance, and Better Days kind of is, but as Lam said, it's definitely more focused on the hardship aspect. There's romance between the characters, but it's very much rooted in their struggles. The research they did on bullying definitely comes through in the film. Without wishing to make it sound preachy, like Better Days, it definitely has a genuine social purpose. And it comes with a final, credit scene where it details measures taken by China's Ministry of Education to help protect students. To be honest, this kind of thing runs the danger of falling flat. But here, after what's a really emotionally involving and kind of draining journey, it's actually a bit of a relief, and it's upbeat to read about these actions being taken, especially since, the bullying in the film, it gets really bad. It's quite shocking. The film does have other perspectives. It has perspectives from the teachers and the police in particular, and we see how they try to deal with things. And it's also got the ways in which the general public and, say, like passers-by react to seeing bullying, whether it's calling the police or, more likely, looking the other way, or even just taking out their mobile phone to grab a picture. This is all very realistic and believable. And the depiction of the university entrance exam pressure in the script is also really grounded. And I think what's very impressive is the way that Lam and the other writers, along with Tsang, they kind of work this social commentary, romance and thrills into a film which as a whole is very gripping, even for an older audience member like me. And so yeah, hearing this about the creative process for the film is really interesting. And the fact that Tsang chose the novel, and the fact that they worked on it from an early stage together. It does feel like a film that he's very much personally invested in. And again, the level of research they did, which Lam was talking about, that reflects this too. I can really see what Lam means as well about the similarities between Soulmate and Better Days. They are both pretty melancholic. They're both very character-led. And although they are sad, the characters kind of have, big hearts, and you can get some sense of hope from them, even if things don't, necessarily work out for them. And again, this is where the social commentary aspect of the film and the grounding from the research really, really helps.
高考完，我就变成大人了。但是，从来没有一节课教过我们如何变成大人。
Better Days as a film, it visually is really interesting as well. And you can see that it has very different sides in the fact that we have the scenes of Chen Yan in school are really, really grounded and gritty, with a naturalistic, almost documentary feel. We get lots of shots of huge crowds of students and some really tightly edited teaching and exam scenes. Lots of quick shots of pencils and paper. We get students chatting, rushing around. All of this creates a real sense of tension and pressure surrounding everything in the school and of the Gaokao exam theme. And I think Tsang being so successful in reflecting this part of the film is probably one of the key reasons why it resonated so well with young Chinese audiences. But then outside of the school, so the scenes on the streets and the dark alleyways, and in the wrong side of the track style apartments where Nyan and Bei live and hide out, the film has a really different look and feel. It's got a really atmospheric use of light and colour, which, for me, this kind of reminded me a bit of Wong Kar-wai and some other Hong Kong filmmakers. This makes Better Days really surprisingly quite beautiful in places, almost dreamlike. And it's very effective having this kind of, these very two different looks. It kind of gives the two characters this different, quieter world where they can kind of get to know each other properly and still have some kind of dreams and refuge. This combination of these two sides of the film works really well, and it nicely underscores this stark difference between the harshness of the bullying and the exam stress, with this burgeoning sense of hope and intimacy between the two young leads. And this makes the film all the more engaging for not just being grim and downbeat all the way through, thankfully.
做得到吗？
想试试。
那说好了，你保护世界，我保护你。
But yeah, to be fair, Better Days isn't without its flaws. Mainly an overly long 2 hour and 50-minute running time. And it's also got some kind of unnecessary chronological displacement during the final act. Presumably, this was there to try and add kind of an element of mystery, though it's actually kind of hard to imagine most viewers not seeing the late twist coming. But it's never boring, and though it's overlong, and it's mainly just a little muddled in places, I'd say. I think it's this final act which has also run into some controversy with the audience in China, or at least with some netizens, who've accused it of lifting some plot lines of the internationally popular Japanese writer Keigo Higashino, in particular the novels Journey Under the Midnight Sun and The Devotion of Suspect X, which itself has been made into a film many times. I guess I can kind of see where people are coming from, or, without getting into details, there are some basic similarities. Though I think Better Days has a very different context, and I think that while Midnight Sun and Suspect X are great books, to be fair, they're not massively original themselves, although, hopefully me saying that is not going to turn any of you against me. This aside though, Better Days is really effective, and it's very involving as the drama builds all the way through the film. And its ending it's no less moving or thoughtful for its inevitability. The film, it does have a narrative device, which, to be fair, I usually hate, which is that it opens with a very brief scene in the present, before then the main story plays out in the past, and we kind of return to the opening scene at the very end. Though I think Better Days is one of the few films where this, to be fair, sort of works. Partly because it does have some very strong opening lines, with Nyan as a teacher, speaking in English to her class. This used to be our playground. This was our playground. Does anyone know the difference between was and used to be? And yeah, so maybe it's not coming across maybe just because of my lack of acting skills, but this is actually a really good summary of the film as a whole, and it fits with the title. It's kind of a meditation on the difference between the good and the bad of the past, and the gap between nostalgia and harsh reality, and just about getting on with life.
May push back the jungle of suspicion. Let both sides join in creating a new endeavor.
春天，你长大以后还会再见，对不对？
There's also excellent acting from both Zhou Dongyu and Jackson Yi, and they take characters who could have been, maybe a bit more cliched, melodramatic in other hands, and they make them really convincing, flawed but likeable. So you said it's a very strong script, and Derek Tsang gets great and very believable performances from the two of them, and he manages to make them both very easy to root for, and their relationship is a very engaging one. Jackson Yi is absolutely solid, and he does a really nice job of kind of playing against the, I guess you could say, the pretty boy type, which you might expect from a boy band member. Though Zhou Dongyu is really, really good, and it's very easy to see why she's been winning so many awards and praise for this film and for other films. She's really pretty different to the stereotypical image a lot of the time we might have of actresses, and she seems to have a real talent for just quietly throwing herself into her role and making audiences relate to her. And again, in Better Days, there's nothing very showy or flashy in her work, just very, very engaging and believable. So let's have the second of our acting scenes now, and let's go back to Eleanor Blackburn and Hyland Fuller. And this scene's about 50 minutes into the film, and Chen Nian is now staying at Xiaobei's place. She's been beaten up by the bullies again on the way home from school, and she's taking a shower when Xiaobei arrives home. He sees that she's in the shower, but he doesn't watch her. She comes out from the shower wearing a t-shirt, obviously looking upset. She approaches Xiaobei, who's sitting on the sofa.
Can you protect me? I don't have money to pay you. But I must go to Beijing.
Don't move. Do you feel hot?
What did you say?
Do you feel hot?
No. Is it hard?
What?
Is the couch hard?
Oh,
No, it's not. Didn't you look down on me before? Give me a notebook.
What?
Give me a notebook. Bring a pen too. Write this down. Shenyang owes Bei big time. I haven't specified what it is. It could just be a meal. I didn't say it would be a meal. It could be something else. You have to get up early tomorrow.
Cool, thanks for that, guys. And yeah, I think what you can get from this scene is, it's almost halfway through the film. And the relationship between Chen Yan and Xiaobei's changing a lot. Is a shift there. But I think this kind of harks back to what I was talking about with Lam earlier, in that it's not so much of romance. And the fact is, like, almost at the core of their relationship is it's still rooted in their struggles and the problems they're having, the bullying and the role which Xiaobei is now starting to take in Chen Yan's life. And I think, again, that this is what really gives Better Days a lot of its power. It is the fact that everything is this kind of balance between the harshness of life and this sort of sense of hope or sense of trying to still get on with it and get something out of it. So it's another very powerful scene from the film. For my money, Better Days easily ranks as one of the very best Chinese films of the last couple of years. And I'm really glad that it's reaching a wider audience, as it shows a different side to Chinese cinema, and about how it's certainly possible from films from China to still tackle difficult and possibly controversial subjects. I definitely recommend you check it out, and keep an eye out in the future for Derek Tsang, Jackson Yi, and Zhou Dongyu, as pretty much anything they do is going to be worth watching. But yeah, that's about it for this episode of the Silk Road Movie Podcast. And I hope you've enjoyed this chat about Better Days. A very big thanks again to Lam Wing Sum, screenwriter, for her interview. And thanks again to Eleanor May Blackburn and Hyland Fuller for joining us for the acting scenes, which I'm sure you enjoyed as well. Please do subscribe to us on all the usual podcast platforms and apps, iTunes, Spotify, Google. We're on all of them, and you can find us very easily. And please do follow us on social media as well. And do get in touch if there's anything you'd like to talk to us about, if there's any films, filmmakers, actors, or anything you'd like us to cover in the future. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, do check out all our previous episodes, which are all available. And do tune in for the next episode, which will be coming soon. I'm James, and I hope you've enjoyed your journey along the cinematic Silk Road to China.